Good evening and welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Tim Hanser, your host this evening. Tonight we're going to talk about the proposal by the Federal Railroad Administration to make some major changes to the Northeast Corridor line. The project's called NEC Future. And with me today I have Greg Stroud from the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me on, Tim.
So let's kind of give people a little bit of an update as to what the project is, and how it's going to impact this area of the state.
Okay, so basically, right now we're at the end of the planning, the first planning stage of, it's a really big federal project, $137 billion to modernize the rail corridor from Washington, D.C. to Boston. And so Connecticut is kind of in the in-between of the big cities, and we're sort of coming to grips with some of the impacts and some of the potential benefits.
Okay, so what is it that they're proposing for Connecticut as a whole, and then specifically for southeastern Connecticut?
For Connecticut as a whole, the main plan is basically 79 miles of new track, and 29 of it will be in Fairfield County. And then another 50 will be something called the Kenyon to Old Saybrook bypass, and that's sort of affecting southeastern Connecticut the most. There's a side project which is called it's part of the Northern New England Rail Initiative, and that would extend rail from New Haven to Hartford to Springfield, and maybe eventually to Boston. And so that's sort of a side project that they're rolling into this. It's an ongoing project.
Okay. So this bypass that we have in southeastern Connecticut into Rhode Island, what's that look like, and what's the concern at this point?
So basically what we have is it would be approximately 150 foot wide right-of-way, 2 tracks, and it would avoid essentially 5 century-old lift bridges, 11 at-grade crossings, and a couple of really nasty curves that run along the water. So there's reason that people want to avoid it. But this would be a whole new corridor. And so it would come roughly from the Baldwin Bridge, and it would run up through the historic district in Old Lyme at a height of 40 feet approximately. And then would run along 95 until it gets to New London. And at New London, the current plan is to run someplace close to Hodges Square Village, and then maybe through the north and southbound lanes and still continue up 95, and eventually join back with the corridor.
So a 40-foot high structure through Old Lyme, so a 4-story building.
A 4-story building plus potentially 40 feet of wires.
Oh, wow.
And so, but when we look at the plan, we don't just look at it as a rail corridor, we look at it as a utility corridor with a rail component. So if you see, actually on January 4th, Amtrak just announced, they just asked for bids for leasing utilities along this corridor, and we look at it as a sort of access point for developing the entire southeastern Connecticut, sort of. So we, at Connecticut Trust, we're worried about not just the direct impacts, but how it will change the ecology and the sort of historic nature of the area.
Okay, and so taking it east of the Thames River, what's it look like on the other side of the river from here in Groton and Stonington?
So basically the plan will have near northern misses and hits. So it will scalp each of the historic towns as you go along. So Mystic, Stonington, New London, all these towns get a pretty substantial hit from the plan. It's a little bit hard to tell because the maps aren't very good at this moment. We've asked for better maps and we haven't been able to get them. But we're pretty sure they'll try to run it as close to 95 as they can.
Okay. So before we kind of get into some of the details of why these are, more details of these concerns, what is the price tag approximately for just this bypass section?
The bypass, the best numbers we've heard came from Representative Courtney's office, and he suggests 10 to 15 billion. So we're talking a pretty big number with limited budgets. You'd say it'll be hard to pay for. On the one hand, we know that other parts of the project that are much more expensive will happen. The Hudson River tunnels is probably will end up costing about $20 billion. That will happen. There's a tunnel down in Baltimore that dates to the Civil War. That will happen. That will cost at least $5 billion. And if you look in New York, you see there's a new subway stop that costs over $4 billion. Right. So the numbers are high, but they're not inordinate if there's a need and desire for it.
Well, and it seems to me that the difference between this bypass proposal and the two other ones that you just mentioned, the tunnel underneath the Hudson River and then the replacement tunnel in Baltimore, is that those projects have been proposed and discussed for many years.
Exactly.
Whereas
right.
this is kind of out of the blue. This is the first time anybody's seen this proposal.
So those proposals actually, and those projects actually predated NEC Future. They go, the Hudson River tunnels, they were discussing this back in the early 2000s. The bypass actually wasn't in the initial plan at all. So if we go to 2012, the initial announcement, there are 98 alternatives, and that's for the entire corridor. So 98 alternatives, and there's no bypass. They cut that number down to 12 in 2013, no bypass. They cut it down to 3 alternatives, so there's only 3 plans left, and then the bypass. So there's been much less sort of knowledge and scrutiny. I'd sort of ask any viewer out there, do you know where it goes? What do you know of this plan, and why not? Because it's pretty big, it's pretty important.
Yeah, no, it really has the potential to have some huge impacts on all of these communities. I mean, it sounds like Old Lyme would take a big hit. New London is very vulnerable as well. I can't say I know a lot about how it impacts the other towns, but those two in particular lose a lot. So
between Washington, D.C. and Boston, the number 1 impacted county is New London County. The number 2 impacted county is Washington County, Rhode Island. The number 1 impacted town is Old Lyme. So of all the towns and all the miles, it would be, we believe it would devastate Old Lyme. And for New London, we're talking about, it actually has a smaller geographic size than Old Lyme, despite being a much bigger city. But you guys need your every inch for your tax base. And this has takings that they've announced, and so they're talking about slicing into your tax base, and that certainly has some very serious concerns.
Right, and it seems that if it's going along the 95 corridor, it hits through the shopping malls, which are some of the highest taxpayers in the city.
Yeah, there you go. And we also look at it as not just what the plan is, but potentially what it can be, but potentially how it affects things that already exist. Say for New London, you're a commuter hub. There are limited dollars. So how do we want to spend those dollars in New London? And potentially, I guess you could say, this could bring dollars to New London in exchange for the damage, potentially. Or potentially, this could in fact drain dollars from the existing corridor, and instead, so what exists now and goes through New London becomes a sort of second, third tier. And then so every dollar will go into that new corridor. So when you look at a $10 to $15 billion project, how do they pay it? Partially by taking the money from other pots.
Right. So we've kind of talked a little bit about these costs associated with this project, not only in terms of dollars, but in terms of damage. There's got to be a benefit. And what benefit does it provide to southeastern Connecticut?
For southeastern Connecticut, I actually believe for southeastern Connecticut, it's pretty much purely impact. I really do not see the benefit for southeastern Connecticut. For Providence, it potentially it better connects them to the main line. We don't see a lot of impetus coming from Boston. Boston's mainly interested in the connection between North Station and South Station.
Mm-hmm. Which they've been talking about for 40 years.
And but for southeastern Connecticut, it looks like, in some ways, maybe we're the sacrificial lamb. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly, after this show, we're heading over to southwestern Rhode Island in Charlestown, and they're very much feeling like a sacrificial lamb as well for the interests of their state.
So it sounds to me like we're getting a rail rammed through our communities, or potentially put through our communities, with not really any service provided to this area of the state.
I would say that that's pretty correct. What you could say is this: in a post 9/11, post Sandy world, we have a major artery, a major transportation artery that runs along the coast. It's 2 tracks. It runs over 5-century-old lift bridges, and it connects Boston to New York. And so that's a concern.
Sure.
But we actually believe there are better solutions. They're more cost-effective and have less damage. And so one of these potentially is New Haven to Hartford to Springfield. And that this, sometimes we call this, or it's called the sort of French option. It sounds silly, it sounds good. Everyone wants trains like France, but the idea is that in France they don't always choose the shortest route. They choose the route that they can get the highest speed, and they have a tendency to bend it around Paris. So in this case, Springfield would be Paris.
Well, when I go to Springfield, I usually think of Paris. So, and it also seems like it addresses some of the other concerns with the shoreline route. I mean, with sea level rise, the rail really is right along the shoreline in many areas. It didn't suffer major damage during Sandy, but it certainly exposed its vulnerability.
Exactly. It's built pretty high.
Right.
And already there's no plans to get rid of the existing corridor. In fact, just the opposite. Whether this bypass happens or not, they will be upgrading a lot of the existing corridor, which means making it more resilient, which for people that were hoping at one time for, what did they call them, Swedish catenaries? That was the idea at one time east of, I know a little bit east of here, they said that they had these beautiful IKEA-like structures that would hold the wires, and it was the sort of eco-fantasy of trains, and the reality was something different. Well, these existing ugly structures are probably going to get uglier over the next dozen years.
Okay, and that's really completely irrelevant to this project. It's a parallel issue.
It's part of It's part of the project. I guess it's one way of thinking about is that. So we have $137 billion, and you say $137 billion is never going to happen. It's never going to be funded, even between now and 2040. And perhaps that's right. But the intent is never to fund all of it. The intent right now is to bring this project all on a lot of projects really, all on a single raft, bring them through the planning process, and then break them up. And those projects, some of them will just be like fixing the wires and making them more resilient. Some of them will be bigger, like the bypass. So some will be potential stations. So they'll break up all these projects, and then they'll push them through and try to get them shovel ready.
Okay, so I think we've kind of talked. I think we've covered pretty well what the project looks like. So I want to talk a little bit about what the response has been up to this point, and then we could kind of go from there and talk about what role local communities have as well as the state government has in these decisions.
Okay. So far, a lot of towns really woke up to this a few days before public comment was set to end. Initially, they announced the final draft on November 15th of 2015. And the public comment was set to close on January 31st. Old Lyme on January 26th, say, of last year, probably had 5 or 6 total public comments. No one knew about it. We woke up, and this is part of what our group SECoast was about. We woke up the area, and we got a lot of public comments, say somewhere between 1,500 and 1,800 public comments. And that brought the FRA and the Federal Railroad Administration in to kind of take us a little bit more seriously. But since that time, not much they settled on the plan, not much has changed. We've tried to engage the Federal Railroad Administration. We've reached out to our representatives. We've built up a lot of opposition, but it looks like right now they're still planning on pushing the plan through.
Okay, so what is the next step at this point with the plan?
The next step is called they have announced a preferred alternative, as they call it. So it's the final blueprint. And then they select it technically, and they take it to a record of decision. So a record of decision is supposed to happen on January 31st, so a couple weeks. And once that record of decision happens, it sort of officializes it with the courts. So once you reach a record of decision, if you want to change the plan, it will take an action of the courts to do it. So if someone tells you, don't worry, we'll fix the plan in a couple of years, it's pretty hard to fix the plan. There's a little bit of wiggle room, but we're talking 100 feet here, 100 feet there. So they can switch a tunnel to a bridge, they can fix an embankment, and add some pretty stone face. But they're not going to change the plan much from here on out without the courts.
So I guess that brings us to what can the community do? What can viewers do at this point to perhaps try to influence any outcomes? And if not that, what steps can be taken to kind of resist any changes?
There's it will take matching state funds. So there's a lot of reason to reach out to your state representatives, your state senators, at this level, and tell them that you oppose at least this. We believe at least that the bypass certainly should be opposed. You can reach out to the governor. I would probably say the best thing right now would be to reach out to the governor's office. In December, Governor Malloy actually said that he would strongly oppose the bypass. He's been quiet for nearly a year. He came out with a very strong joint statement with the other Democrats in opposition. I was impressed with the strength of the statement. And the statement said, basically, we will do anything we can right now to get rid of this bypass. And it's not exactly clear what's happening. So maybe if I had to ask viewers anything, find out what's happening. Find out what they're doing. Are they submitting public comment against the bypass? Are they taking some steps to oppose it? Because technically, the FRA can still has a few weeks to get rid of it, and they can, and it wouldn't be that hard to do. So that's one way. That's one way to do it. We've had excellent support from, particularly from Senator Blumenthal in his office, and he's on the Transportation Committee. So we have excellent allies. But it's hard to say what can you do when you have a giant federal agency that knows we oppose this pretty vehemently, and they're pushing it through nevertheless.
So it sounds like there are really kind of two approaches that can be taken. There's the federal approach to try to prevent the bypass from being included in the final decision. Yep. But then there's the state level approach to prevent any matching funds from being allocated.
So one of the problems is once the record of decision is reached, and this enters the big plan, then suddenly sort of the money starts flowing in, and there's questions. You say, what's the benefit for NEC Future? Well, one benefit is we know that Connecticut has a huge backlog of infrastructure projects. Sometimes this sort of attempt by the governor's office to address this is called Let's Go Connecticut, right? It's a $100 billion plan, and roughly, in fact, the same cost as NEC Future. And so how is Connecticut going to pay for this plan? One way is you roll some of those projects into bigger federal projects, and you get other states to pay for it. So if Providence wants a bypass so much, then let's have Providence pay for some of this infrastructure. Let's have Massachusetts pay for some of this infrastructure. And so it becomes hard for a state to resist these dollars.
Well, it would just seem to me that the Let's Go CT proposal doesn't talk about the bypass. This is not part of the governor's proposal. Whereas some of the other parts of the NEC Future, such as the Hartford-Springfield line, is an enhancement of one of his priorities.
Exactly. So in fact, you could look at NEC Future as a way to help fund a project that's very popular, but it's kind of out of money. And so this would potentially roll federal dollars into that project. And so other states want something in exchange. And our fear is that they want southeastern Connecticut in exchange. So there are benefits, but there are real drawbacks. And we see the benefits really not in southeastern Connecticut.
Right.
We see them down in Fairfield potentially, or certainly this central spine.
So it sounds like we're kind of at the mercy of the way the politics play out in Washington. Not to say that it's partisan, but more that just the way funding happens for federal projects.
The funny thing is, I think all of us in some ways want our government to be more effective. But there are drawbacks when you have an effective government. And so if you watch transportation hearings sometime, Republicans and Democrats, it's the friendliest panel you've ever seen.
Sure.
And there have been a lot of bipartisan work on that panel, including the FAST Act last December, a huge transportation project, and everyone got along and was happy. So in this case, the transportation, it's maybe a little too functional. For us in this case, I think we look at it and we say, you bring up Let's Go Connecticut. For southeastern Connecticut, there's one of the top sort of front burner items is widening I-95. There's a lot of support, frankly, in the region for it. There's real arguments against it. You build more capacity, they'll simply fill it up, right? Unless you. So how do you balance this? But when we look at it, we say, well, if you widen I-95 and then you run a rail project right beside it, we're talking about a major change to the area. And then you start adding utilities. And if you look at Let's Go CT and you read what they say, our plan for I-95 is to encourage development from Greenwich to North Stonington. So then you start getting, with these projects, in utilities, you start getting something that they call induced growth. And that means it's sprawl, if you will. Sure. And so we certainly have sort of big concerns that go beyond the rail.
Okay. So that's how it ties into the Let's Go CT. While it's not explicitly a proposal that the governor has put forth, it's conceivable that using this corridor option for expansion of 95 can also then kind of be kind of the shoehorn in. Yeah.
And technically, it's quite. There's one serious concern is that a big highway project, a big infrastructure project built in the same area really should be included in the rail plan, and it isn't there. So it's interesting if you go and you dig into the plan and you look at something called cumulative impacts, and you see that each state DOT is supposed to list projects that are important and potential cumulative impacts. And so a cumulative impact would be like two projects together that might be more than the sum, right? So
Sure.
2 + 2 is 6.
Right.
So if you look at the Pennsylvania DOT, they've got like 4 pages of projects. You look at Maryland, they have projects. You look at New Jersey, they have the widening of the turnpike. But you look at Connecticut and you say, where are the projects? It's empty.
Right, and it's funny you compare it to these other states, with the exception of maybe New Jersey. Connecticut's got to have the most mileage of track. I mean, Pennsylvania and Maryland just skirts the edge. And to think that they have 4 pages in Pennsylvania for maybe it's 40 miles, and we have 79 miles?
79 miles. 104, there's 104, the existing corridor is 104 miles, and then but 79 new miles this would add.
So we have 0 pages.
Huge.
Yeah, it's that says a lot about what the merits of some of these proposals really are.
It is, and it says how much we really need to engage. If you live in New London or Waterford or East Lyme, you need to engage these. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars that are potentially of construction projects right in your backyard.
Right. So I'm thinking when you mentioned East Lyme and Waterford, it made me think of our state delegation. And Senator Formica is representing the 20th district, which covers New London, Waterford, East Lyme, Old Lyme,
all the way.
Montville, Old Saybrook, and I can't remember what other towns. And he is the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee.
Yes, newly appointed. So, and Paul Formica has been on this. Let me put it this way: on the federal level, we have Democrats,
right,
and we've had good relations with them. On the state level, in this area, we've had mainly Republicans,
right,
and we've had very good relations with them. And Paul Formica has been very supportive. I know has significant concerns about the plan, and it's important and helpful that he's on appropriations. I will say, though, that when this plan goes through to the funding stage, it's not going to be for another few years.
Right. So we don't know who will be there.
Who will be there then, or what deals will be offered, or what the budget will look like. We've also had excellent support from a local state representative named Devin Carney, young Republican, but now he's the ranking member on transportation.
Right. So
we have Southeastern Connecticut. I don't think it's entirely a mistake that Devin is now, because he's engaged and he's become an important person on transportation issues.
Yeah. And there are a lot of transportation issues that I think will be coming up with Southeastern Connecticut. Not just NEC Future. There's commuter rail service and some other issues as well.
And I think that's what we're not. I suspect there are very few viewers of this program that are not supportive of rail. I'm supportive of rail, but we look and we say, what kind of rail? And how do we distribute a limited dollars? And when we look at, we say commuter rail, better commuter rail, more frequent, faster.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense. And if you say we don't have enough money to pay for it, well, we have enough money for high-speed rail, perhaps. So maybe we should spend it on that.
Right. And actually, as service was added to Southeastern Connecticut for Shoreline East, and when New London was getting more and more trains, ridership was going up and up to the point where New London is the top weekend stop.
Oh, is it?
And well, outside of New Haven. New Haven obviously is kind of the hub.
It's huge, yeah.
But it is number one, and it's like number 4 on weekdays, despite having half the service of other stations. So, that I know that's my personal concern is how does this impact commuter rail? I know the FRA has talked a little bit about it.
This is something where I think, as you recall, when we sat down on, I think it was August 30th before a big FRA meeting, and we sat down with some other staffers, and we sat down with Mayor Passero, and we talked through some of these issues on, will this help commuter capacity in New London? Could this offer better solutions for New London? Because the last thing I wanted to do was come to New London and encourage them to impose something that was good for New London. And I think we came to think that this plan really offered very little to New London, or there are better solutions. One potential benefit that you would hope for would be it would free up capacity. And I think you've helped convince me that the capacity issue isn't as strong as it might be.
Yeah, no, there really, capacity on the current line isn't really the issue. Capacity within the trains isn't really the issue. There certainly needs to be some renegotiating of bridge closures.
And that comes up soon, that 2018?
Right.
And a lot of towns right now aren't engaging. I mean, I've talked to local officials and they say, really?
Yeah.
So that would be another thing when you viewers out there, you might ask your local select person and say, hey, are we doing anything about the renegotiating?
Right. Yeah, and the state DOT has done their analysis. I mean, they've done analysis several times in terms of actually boat traffic, particularly the Niantic River Bridge is one that they've looked at since they've rebuilt it. Mm-hmm. And the reality is the number of openings that are required now by the contract greatly exceeds the boat traffic and the demand for boat traffic. Now, some argue that the economy is changing, it's improving. That might mean a little bit more marine traffic, but even still, there is an enormous amount of buffer for that bridge in particular.
And we say, right now, Acela runs, I believe, 6-car trains. We say it would be a lot cheaper to lengthen platforms and run longer trains, run trains closer together with positive train control.
Right.
There's other solutions, and we look at it, and sometimes I think the problem is that an agency is like a hammer, and it looks for nails, right? And it doesn't look for screws or anything else, it just looks for nails. And so the FRA says, let's build high-speed rail, and we can save 25 minutes. And that's basically one of the big benefits. I've talked to them, and I've talked to James Redeker, I've talked to David Carroll, who's the lead contractor. All these people, they focus on speed.
Right.
That sort of surprised me. Speed, 25 minutes. And I say, rather than spending billions on 25 minutes while you're sitting in your seat, why not spend millions saving 5 minutes on parking, 5 minutes on ticketing, 5 minutes on connectivity? Just make it nicer to sit in your seat, more productive. That's when you're reading your email, playing on your phone, whatever,
Right.
Chatting.
Well, it's funny because one of the things that you mentioned was lengthening the trains, adding capacity to the trains that already are running, and that's exactly what this next generation that's going to replace Acela is doing. Those trains will hold more people.
They are not. Are they projecting? I don't believe they
thought it was
project
like
longer. They can
not
have
longer, I
not
think it's
longer,
just
but more people
reconfigured.
per
Right.
train car.
And they're talking about higher speeds with those trains compared to the Acela trains, and that's probably not going to save 20 minutes, but it might save 5 or 10.
Five or 10. They on this this bypass is because it would share traffic with commuter and potentially with commuter and freight, although there wouldn't be a lot of freight. It has a maximum speed of about 155. That's a legal limit. But speaking with officials, they think this train might, if it tops out at around 100 or so, they'd be very happy. So it's not, we're talking, sometimes I say it's 1950s ambition and 1970s technology. So it's...
Yeah, and 100 compared to what it's running now is not vastly more. I don't know where it tops out in southeastern Connecticut, but it hits 100 around New Haven.
I mean, in all truth and fairness, when it crosses the Connecticut River, it crosses at about 45 miles an hour. And so every slowdown it potentially is a problem. Of course, high-speed rail isn't about slowing down at all, which means that it's not about offering any service to our area.
Right, and actually, with kind of to that point, so there in the current plan for the bypass, there is this proposal for a high-speed station in Groton called the Mystic New London High-Speed Station. And it's located on the maps roughly at the intersection of 95 and 117.
So it's on the, is it on the dump? Is that the?
It's very close to the old Groton landfill, and on the other side of it, it's very close to the reservoir.
Yeah.
So Groton's drinking water comes from that spot. So what are your, I mean, have you uncovered any information about that station? Not specifically where it's located, but is it even likely to happen?
I would be, there is a plan, there's a plan, I believe it dates to 2013 that looked at all the stations and potential stations, and you know, they dangle a lot of stations. Stores was one of the most popular ones.
Right.
And you look in stores and they said they'd build stores, but they wouldn't have any regular service through 2040. So I would be very wary if you think you would get any regular service. I mean, already Acela is underused in New London.
Right.
I mean, how many people use it? So it's really for driving through the area.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there were 2 new stations, high-speed stations proposed in Connecticut. That was one, and then Green's Farm, which was a very bizarre choice.
Odd choice.
Was the other. And one thing that kind of struck me about those 2 when I was reviewing the plans was that compared to other stations that were being discussed in other states, these didn't seem to have the boxes checked for, you know, high population density and all these other things that these other areas did.
If you know, I have a hard time imagining. Yes, they address that very specifically. If they build a rail station near New London that gets any traffic, it will not be to supplement the existing service. It will be to kill it.
Yeah, and that's the concern locally.
Yeah, and that's very reasonable concern. Why build a station for 2 or 3 people? It's just not. They're not going to. I'm actually surprised that they even dangle it as much as they do.
Yeah, it does seem a bit odd, and if the goal is speed, removing the station may not give them a lot more speed, but it gives them that lack of slowdown.
Frankly, Old Saybrook would probably be slightly more plausible and slightly less threatening to New London, but I just don't see. The whole point really is to go from New York to Boston.
Right.
And Providence also wants a nice piece.
Right, which seems to be that's why these inland proposals to Worcester or Storrs really kind of fell off of the list of possibilities because of Providence's influence.
It is, and so when we look at it, you say, well, will this plan really happen? And part of the way when we evaluate it, we say, well, why is this plan on the table? And part of the reason the plan is on the table is because Providence wants to be included. It's a non-starter. Senator Reed of Rhode Island is the ranking member on the Transportation Committee. And they cannot overlook Providence. And so our fear is that on January 31st, they'll take what's a somewhat full menu, if you would, and they're going to cut down the dishes to very few. And so the one dish that serves and feeds Providence is the bypass.
Right.
And once they finalize the menu, well, this is a question I asked James Rediker, so Commissioner of the DOT. I asked him, so if it isn't in the plan, do you think it will get back into the plan by 2040? And he said, he waited, paused, and they said no. So if it's not, so they're not adding entrees to this menu through 2040, or not big ones. So our area really should look and say, Providence wants to be fed, and we're arguably the dish.
Right. Now, so assuming let's kind of go forward to January 31st.
Okay.
First, and it is on the record of decision. This bypass is included.
Yes.
The likelihood of it being funded in the near term, I would think, is quite low relative to the priorities of the state, relative to the funding available from the federal government. It's a second
tier project.
Right. So what does that mean to the communities when it's planned but not built?
That's, in Old Lyme, this is because we're very much a direct hit, and it's got more publicity. We've had some business owners who have had reported 25% drops in value of their properties, even from near misses. So that is extremely alarming. Just having the purple line on the map.
Right.
So if you're, say, a museum and it runs through your property, who wants to fund the next gallery that will be destroyed in 15 years? It makes it hard to fundraise. So we look at really the impacts as starting. They've already started, but this project, I would be surprised if very surprised if it broke ground before 12 years, say, from now.
Right. Yeah,
Very
it just
surprised.
seemed, like you said, it's second tier. I mean, I would think that the state would really prioritize Hartford to Springfield. And
Hartford to Springfield, fixing some of the existing bridges that some of these century-old lift bridges. There are other higher priorities, but it's in their own sort of stair step that they have of priorities. It's certainly not at the bottom either.
Right. Yeah.
So
it seems like we have a small window of opportunity to prevent it from being on the record of decision, and the recommendation is to really contact the governor's office directly and advocate through him.
Governor's office, and there's one other thing you
Sure.
can do. There's you can write to info@necfuture.com and write a comment and say, hey, I'm concerned about high-speed rail. I think whatever. Speak truthfully. Speak from your heart, and say maybe you're concerned about the bypass, and you don't think it should be part of this plan, because we don't know anything about it.
Right.
And so that's the other thing you can do is write in. Part of what one that got us so much attention early on was not the quality of our arguments, it was the quantity.
Yeah, and I remember in the plan, there's a whole section about all the comments. I think they actually include every comment.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, the whole plan is, I mean, if you want to read something short, start with War and Peace, because this one's a little longer. But it makes a comment about how, it shows how many comments were from every state. And Connecticut is off the charts. And the vast majority of those comments are in eastern Connecticut, and with Old Lyme really kind of leading the charge well over and above everybody else.
It's more comments, we believe there are more comments from Old Lyme than there were from Manhattan or Philadelphia or Boston. So that is both great for Old Lyme, but it also suggests just how little engagement there's been.
Sure.
And this is what, I think some people you get, it's just another plan. And I try to tell people, this isn't just another plan. This is really a once in a generation plan. And so I think that's part of the reason that no one knows quite what to do with it. Because when you encounter something once in a generation, what do? You don't take it seriously, or you don't even see it, or because it's so big. And so this plan, when they announce a record of decision, if they do on January 31st, it will replace a blueprint for the Northeast Corridor that dates back to 1978. So they've been using the same blueprint for, what is that, about 40 years. And so this blueprint, once they put it in place, it's going to be around till 2040.
Or maybe longer. That's
exactly. It truthfully, probably longer.
Right. It's just this project has been going on really from the start, 2008, 2009.
2012 officially, okay. but yes,
there
were pieces of it that were before then.
Yeah. So this is a long process. So
it's a long process.
I think it's important to make sure that people understand that you don't come back to this 2 years from now and say, oh no, we don't like this, we're going to change it.
We don't, you don't, and that's part of that's really, the public has a court-protected right to make informed decisions. And we say, is this an informed decision? Is there enough information out there for the public to make decisions? Has the FRA done enough to make that choice from the menu, not just a good choice, and we think it isn't, but also even a legal choice. And so right now, we're just trying to get the public engaged and to say, this will affect every single small and large transportation issue from Washington, D.C. to Boston till at least, you said, 2040, think 2065.
Right.
So every one of us will be, probably, most of us passed away by the time it happens.
And the rest of us will be living with the decisions of our grandfathers.
We will. So let's get right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It seems like it's a really big project that we really need to pay more attention to. Now, I guess in the event that this is not included in the decision, it sounds like we've kind of dodged a bullet.
Absolutely.
But what else is there to do at that point? Is there other things to do, and where would somebody's energy be best placed in that scenario?
Well, we try. I mean, the idea is not to be simply a voice of no, but to try to constructively engage with the Connecticut DOT. I know it sounds, how do you constructively engage with the Connecticut DOT? You show up for you try to show up when there are hearings. You try to listen to these things when they come out. It's hard to say, what can we do? We have a lot of infrastructure projects heading our direction. And this is just, at Connecticut Trust, we're aware part of the reason that Connecticut Trust has gotten involved specifically in southeastern Connecticut is they say there's Let's Go CT, there's the rail issue, there's utilities issues, there's sewers, there's all kinds of development that's potentially happening in this area. And whether you're for or against the development, let's make sure we do it right and we do it with an open, honest process. and we respect environmental and preservation law. And that's really open, honest government. And I suspect that more than any other group, the Green Party would be really on board for that.
Absolutely. No, we've been following this issue. I mean, rail is in general is something that locally we spend a lot of time and energy on, and I would say for the most part we're very strong advocates. However,
Absolutely.
when there's projects that don't make sense, we don't spend money that doesn't need to be spent. It seems like this project falls into that category, that there are other solutions that cost a lot less money and accomplish nearly the same goals.
Nearly the same goals. And to think that even if we dodge this bullet, there will be a lot of changes to the existing corridor. And I would encourage your viewers to engage that when it happens, because every one of those century-old lift bridges they're historic structures. Some of them are quite beautiful.
Right.
Every one over the next years is going to be redone. Right now we're engaging with the walk bridge down to Norwalk, and the process has not been an ideal one. And so in some ways Norwalk, it's too late. Norwalk is kind of engaged a little bit seriously, a little bit too late, and we're trying to make sure that what happened in Norwalk with the walk bridge doesn't happen across the Connecticut, it doesn't happen in New London, it doesn't happen in Mystic, it doesn't happen every place else.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's a good example of a project that I think everybody agrees that that's a necessity, that the walk bridge is in dire need of replacement. It needs to be an upgraded structure from what it is currently, yet it still has created a fair amount of acrimony just because of the process that's been engaged.
It was engaged in some ways. This is why you engage early, because at this point, the walk bridge is considered an emergency.
Right.
And so it gets around all kinds of rulemaking.
Right.
And so we'd like to engage before we have an emergency. So say if we block this bypass, we still have a rail project that's running along the coast, and we have to engage that and think about it. I suspect most of your viewers are very sympathetic to ideas of sea level rise. Right. So how do we deal with that with the existing rail? And the answers are it's not easy. I don't think the FRA came along and said, let's destroy southeastern Connecticut. They're smart people. They have tough choices. There's political constraints, and they made one that's very damaging potentially for our area.
No, and if anybody really looks at the rail map in southeastern Connecticut, there is a lot of it's understandable why this proposal was there. There's a lot of curves, and there's the movable bridges and the at-grade crossings. So it seems cut it off, and of course on a piece of paper that works brilliantly. It works. It's infallible on paper. But in reality, it just has huge impacts. That we need to be aware of.
And it wasn't out of ignorance of these impacts that this plan was decided on. In fact, the lead project manager at Parsons Brinkerhoff, and this is the company that's leading it, is sort of the outside contractor for the FRA. They did the Big Dig up in Boston. They're working on this one. They did the Baldwin Bridge. So the lead actually raised his kids in Old Lyme.
Oh, wow.
So he's from Old Lyme, essentially, or lived in Old Lyme for about a decade, left to go down to North Carolina, comes back now with a big damaging plan, and they knew exactly. Let me say, the people that worked on this plan, there's a lot of Connecticut input on this plan. It wasn't done out of ignorance. It was.
So that's an interesting detail that I think for kind of for viewers to kind of bear in mind, that there is not, it's not simply just we drew a line on a map. I mean, there are a lot of political considerations outside of the region at play, and those are challenging, but it was not done strictly out of ignorance.
And part of the way if Providence is going to advocate for this, well, southeastern Connecticut needs to, and southwestern Rhode Island, which actually share an awful lot in common.
Yes,
they need to advocate too, and part of that is making it clear that this is a real issue for your representatives. Because let me tell you, 8 months ago, it was hard to get people to listen to us. And now everyone's listening. It's why? Because the public is engaging.
Right.
And if the public engages, so will I believe, a lot of government follow.
Okay, so I think we're just about out of time, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to, if there's any last thought that you want to share.
One last thought.
Sure.
How we've worked our whole plan is with the web and social media. So if you want to get in touch with us and you want to follow us in the latest news, I'd suggest if you're on Facebook, that's our most active source of information, and we're SECoast. If you look up SECoast, SECoast, on Facebook, you'll find us. We have a mailing list at SECoast.org, and you can also find us at the Connecticut Trust.
Okay.
So follow us and stay in touch and ask those questions, and
Great.
we'll be around.
Well, thank you for coming on, and as this
Much
progresses,
appreciated.
may have you on again.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you very much.
All right. I hope everybody enjoyed the show, and thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Africa,